Okay, so quick overview, Motionbuilder. You have your usual menus here. You won't be using a lot of the menus. So what I'm going to focus on mostly here, the open stuff. If you don't have this layout, you can, let's say you loaded Motionbuilder and you have this kind of layout. You can revert to this one, editing. Hopefully it doesn't crash. Yay. Okay. So this is the default layout, the best layout for a single screen. You can move these panels around. So if you have two screens, you want more space in the viewport, you can just click, hold, and drag it around. Okay. You will see it dock like this. It's auto docking to the panels. You can actually change that. So if you hold down Control and you move this around, it doesn't auto dock anymore. Okay, so you can bypass that a little bit. If you remove Control, it will dock again. So I'm going to revert back to editing. So over here, this you will be using a lot. So I'm going to open a new scene. In the asset browser here down there, you will see a bunch of folders. So one of them is called Previs Moves. These samples come from Motionbuilder, from Autodesk. So I'm going to just load up one of them so we have a character on screen so we can talk about the overview. Okay. So I load that in. All takes. So I'll explain this quickly. So what these mean? All takes, it means, so Motionbuilder has the functionality of having there's one FBX file, but inside that FBX file it has multiple takes. What by takes I mean is animations. So it could have running, could have punching, but they're completely on different, if you want to say, tracks. Okay, so that's what a take means. A take means it's another animation track. Okay. You can load a character with no animation. Let's say you want to merge two characters and you just want the T-pose, so you can apply some motion on it later on. You can load it without animation. Backfist is the actual name of the take inside this FBX file. Okay, so the FBX is called Backfist, but the only take inside that file is called Backfist. Okay. You will see in a minute what that means. Options is a little bit overdoing it for the first class. I won't touch too much on it, but we're not going to use it today. We'll use it later. So it's a bit overwhelming. Basically, options will let you merge with options. So if you want just the motion, or if you want just the character, or if you want to merge just the cameras. So think of it as a merge by selection, if you want. So it gives you merges what you have selected here in these ones. So if you just want to, let's say, merge cameras from an existing scene or an old scene, you go discard all, you click on the top element, and you just select cameras down here. Okay, so that's what options is. Here, if you have the FBX file with like 5 different takes, so let's say running, punching, jumping, it will list all those takes for you. Okay, so you will have running, jumping, punching here. So you can merge only one take out of that file. So these are the options that are available. I'm going to merge it again. So I'm going to choose all takes. I want all the animations in that file. There's only one, so it's only going to open one. So Backfist is a simple motion capture backfist animation. Right now, this character is being driven. Remember last week we discussed a character has a skeleton, which are these joints. And on top of the skeleton is being driven by the control rig, which is a normal control rig you use in Maya. It's the same process in Motionbuilder. So right now we only have a mesh and a skeleton. Okay. There's keys on the obviously on those joints. What's missing in this scene is a control rig. So right now this character, there's only one character. So if we go in Navigator right here. So Navigator is think of it as the outliner in Maya. It lists everything in the scene. Okay? So it lists sort of by groups. So in the scene, sorry? Oh, okay. Yeah. Orbit is, okay, yeah, keyboard shortcuts. So you can use these buttons up here. Panning is this one. So the hotkey, if you press Control Shift, actually check what kind of shortcuts do you use. So if you go in Settings, Interaction Mode. Okay, by default it's using Motionbuilder. Okay. You have the option to switch to Maya shortcuts. Okay, I don't recommend it just because there's some things do not transfer well to Maya. Okay, so like let's say in Motionbuilder there's a certain shortcut. It doesn't exist in the Maya shortcut, so you have to use the Motionbuilder shortcut. You can, if you're having a hard time and you like using keyboard shortcut, you can switch, but I recommend staying with Motionbuilder shortcuts. Okay. So if everybody's on Motionbuilder, the keyboard shortcut is Control Shift and left mouse for rotating. Okay. If you hold down Shift and you left mouse, you pan. Okay. For zooming in, it's you hold down Control and you zoom in and out. It's the same for these buttons. This is rotate, this is pan, and this is zooming in. This one actually changes your FOV. So you don't want the magnifying glass changes your FOV. So you don't want to really play with that. If you play with it by mistake, you get this fisheye. You can easily change it. You need to go in Cameras, in Navigator. Right now, you're in Producer Perspective. Okay? So this is your perspective view inside Motionbuilder. You go in Cameras, and to activate the settings of this view, you double-click on it, and you will see your new field of view. By default, it's 45. Okay, so if it's above or below, you can just change it and put it back to the default 45. There's a bunch of other things here. We'll go through it when we're doing the camera stuff. Okay. So back to Navigator. This is your scene. So if you open up the scene, you will see all these joints. You will see lights. There's a couple of lights in there. Very, actually, they might be hidden. Let's see. Okay, so they put the lights here, but it doesn't show. Anyways, this file, don't worry too much about it. It's not a big deal. These are, believe, the meshes. So yeah, these are the mesh. And the skeleton is right here under master. Okay? So if you open this up, you will see all the joints. So you have hip, spine, spine 1, all the normal joints of a hierarchy of a human skeleton. So right now this character is being driven by the skeleton. So there's no control rig yet. So what you need to do, we need to activate the control rig in this scene. Okay. So in here, you see this is the only character you have. You can change the name of it. If you go on characters, double click on character, and go rename. Let's call him Jojo. So now, if you see, this is what you just renamed. This is the equivalent of that change in here. If you have two characters, it would load up in that list. Yes. Land school? Yeah, I can try. Let me try. Sometimes I don't have access in the beginning of the semester, but I'll give it a shot. Oh, I think it's already running. It works? Okay, perfect. So we have a character, we have a skeleton, so we just need to activate the control rig. So under the character list, so like I said, if there's two characters, you will see the two characters in here. That's how you switch. So each character has a source. It has to be driven by something, right? So right now, this character is being driven by none. So what none means the skeleton. It's a bit confusing, but that's how they built it. So when you see none, it means it's being driven by the skeleton. So we need to actually change to control rig. So if you click on the drop down on the source and you select control rig, it will ask you, do you want to create this control rig? Because it hasn't been created yet. It's going to ask you, what kind of control rig do you want to create? You want to select FK, IK. You want both, not just IK. You want FK and IK. Okay, so now it didn't transfer the motion. I'll tell you why. Because we only switched from the skeleton mode to the control rig. Yeah. FK, IK, the first button on the left. Yeah, you need both. So the reason the animation didn't transfer is we didn't bake the motion from the skeleton to the control rig. We just switched. So it's like an on-off toggle. Okay. So in able to bake the motion from the skeleton to the control rig, we need to switch back to skeleton. Don't worry about the refresh. When you switch back, it looks like you lost the animation. So don't worry about this. As soon as you press play, everything is back. Okay. So now we need to bake from the skeleton to the control rig. So we can go the character button. This I'm gonna refer to this a lot. So when I say blue button, it means this button. The character, there's only one blue button in there. So when I say the character button, it means the blue button. So if you click on this guy, you have a bunch of options. The file load save, we'll go through it in a bit after the Mixamo stuff. Create, you don't need to worry about this too much right now. This is the one we want. We want to bake. Bake or plot. You'll hear me saying a lot of these words. So when I say bake, it means you're transferring the keys, the translation rotation keys from the skeleton to the control rig. Okay? So that's the one we need. We need to bake to the control rig. We don't need to bake the skeleton because it's already baked. There's already motion on the skeleton. So we need to bake to the control rig. So we always click on the three dots because there's some settings I want you to know about. Click on the three dots. So you have a bunch of options here. The first one I would take off is constant key reducer. You want this to be off, okay? Because what happens is if you have a motion or a keyframe animation, you have this on, it might change the motion. It might change the keys, the trajectories. So always turn that off. Make sure you're at 30 FPS. It should be by default. And then you plot. So now what happens, the difference is it takes those keys from the skeleton and bakes it on the control rig. So you have the control rig activated and the keys on top of it. So as you can see, the UI changes here. It's not skeleton mode anymore. The source is control rig. So now that the control rig is created, we can rename the control rig as well. So if you go back in Navigator /outliner, you open up control rigs, you will see there's a new one here, okay? You right click on the control rig, rename. You can keep the control rig name and just call it JoJo. So now it updates here as well. So now the character JoJo is being driven by the source JoJo control rig. Okay? I'll go through this super quick. Next week we'll go more in depth. So this is your picker, your UI picker. Instead of it's your preference. Instead of picking right in the viewport and moving stuff, you can actually pick in the picker, and it's the same, right? The same technique. So my personal preference for working is I usually like to hide the control rig and use the picker, because then you see just the mesh in the viewport. Okay? So if you go in display, right on top you have three modes. You have normal mode, which sort of is like a, yeah, the wording is weird. Normal mode is like an X-ray mode where you see the mesh and you see the control rig underneath. Okay, so you only see the big ones, right? So you can sort of pick it and work with it like this. It's up to you. The other one, X-ray, is the control rig is right on top of the mesh. So that's the default one. Okay? And models only is just the mesh. So that's the one I prefer, because then I can leave it like this and I can start working with just the picker on the side. So picker very quickly is the red, not the red, the circles. Remember last week we talked about FK, IK? Anybody can tell me what FK is for kinematics? Okay, so how do you work with FK? Exactly, you have to rotate each joint separately, right? And IK? Exactly. So, yes? Okay, so if you don't see this guy, it's probably because you're still in selection mode. Okay, so if you want to see the translation gizmo, you need to select translation on the right hand side up here. So the shortcut for this is T. R is for rotation. on the keyboard. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So that's how you get off of selection mode. So anybody wants to guess in the picker, what's the FK and what's the IK? Yeah. Okay, so you have a point. When you're on skeleton mode, you only have access to FK. You have a point there. So you can do this actually, but it will take you forever to do an animation. But when you're on control rig, you have access to both the FK bones and the IK bones. So the FK bones are these little triangles. Rectangle? Triangle. No, rectangles. So it's the connection between the spheres. Okay? So these are the FK bones. So you can rotate them normally as you are rotating the joints. Now, the red spheres that you see in the viewport or in the UI picker, those spheres are the IK effectors, okay? So the difference is if you select one of these and you click translate, now you're moving the whole chain, okay? So this is the IK versus FK. FK is you have to do this. Okay? Yeah. The difference between them? Okay. So if you can select the FK bones in the picker are these rectangles. See the connection between those spheres, the circles, these ones. So let's say you wanna reposition this arm, okay? So can take the IK arm, position it, and then let's say you want to rotate the fingers. You want to have a nice pose on the, let's say he's punching, right? Like this, in here. So you need to be in X-ray mode in display. You can see the mesh and the controller. So you move the arm in IK, but you want to adjust the fingers. The fingers don't have IK, unfortunately. So you need to go in, select these bones individually. So we're going a little bit in depth here, but I think it's worth mentioning. So there's two kinds of accesses in Motionbuilder. Actually, in any software, not just Motionbuilder, Maya, everything. So you have global rotation or translation and local translation and rotation. The difference is the local stuff. The local axis is the actual orientation of the joint. Okay? So right now we're in global. If you look at below the selection arrow, it's in global. So when you rotate the finger, it's going to be broken. Okay? So what we need, especially for the fingers, you need to be always working with the local pivot. Orientation of the local pivot. So the way to switch this is you click and hold on global and switch to the local axis. So what happens, it's oriented properly with the joint. You're probably going to learn about this in the rigging class. I'm not going to touch too much on it because it's like a separate big conversation. But that's the difference. So you can always switch to local and rotate your fingers properly. See? These bones are a bit more tricky, so you can actually Okay, so picking the mesh also can be sometimes very tricky. So I'm going to show you a little trick. You can actually freeze, like in Maya, you can freeze the mesh so you don't always pick it by mistake, because you're not animating the mesh, you're animating the control rig. So if you select the mesh, you go in groups and you click create. Now you just created sort of a layer or a selection set of that thing you just selected, which is the mesh. So now what you could do, you could hide it. You could remove the selection from it. So if you tick off pick, the next time you select, you will only select the control rig. You have no access to the mesh anymore. Okay? And you can remove translation, rotation, scale. So this way you don't move it by mistake outside the control rig. You can also rename this. If you double click on group, you can name this mesh. You can always, if you need to select it, you can always select it by just selecting the group. Okay. So that's the difference between FK and IK. Always remember, in the picker, the circles are your IK controllers and the rectangles are your FK controllers. The difference in color is, let me just see something. The difference in color, gray means they're in IK mode. Green means IK mode, and gray means they're in FK mode. The difference is the hips always have to be in IK. Difference is if you move the hips now, everything moves with it except the feet. Why? Because the feet are in IK mode, so they're pinned down basically. You can still move them if you select them, obviously. But if you move, let's say, the hips, they're locked to the ground because they're in IK mode. So think of IK as world space, like they're locked in the world, in your viewport, in the XYZ dimensions. While FK is inheriting the parent rotation and translation of whatever's on top of it, basically. Because look, if you move, let's say, the shoulder, everything underneath it will be moved. Because why? Because they're in FK. So if we turn the IK on the arm, show you what happens. Now if we move the shoulder, oh, it's supposed to pin it. I think everything works except the feet. The feet can stay locked. But if you want to lock down the arm, you need to pin it. This is what, sort of think of it as a temporary pinning in the world. So now if you move the shoulder, the hand stays where it is. So this is super useful if you have contacts, if the character is doing like a cartwheel, if he's pushing off something, if he's getting up on the floor. This is where you can use it. Okay, I'm going to move on from the character control. We spent too much time. I think we'll keep it light for today. Down here, where the playback is, and you see all the keys. It's standard playback controls. So you have go back to first frame, stop. You can actually play in reverse. So if you play, and then you can press playback in reverse, so you can see your animation in reverse. This you can loop your animation. If you take, by default it's off, so you can just loop it. you can choose the FPS. You can go up. Wow, 1,000. This is new. They added 1,000 FPS. So I would recommend staying at 30 because most of the mocap is at 30 FPS. So you can switch to 30. And snap-on frames, I highly recommend it because you don't wanna be keying between the frames. Yeah. Some games animate at 60. Yeah. Yeah, especially the new consoles, but not that many. Most of them are 30. That's their target. But I know like Call of Duty and the big shooters, the Battlefield, I think they go at 60. So I'm going to switch back to 24. I'm going to show you what if actually, sorry. I'll keep at 30. I'm just going to show you what snap-on frames mean. So if you don't have snap-on frames, what happens is, see, look at the time code. You're at 29.32. You're in between the frames. So you don't want that. You want to stay, especially when you're keyframing, you want to stay on frames, right? So make sure you have that on snap-on frames, because then when you scrub through the animation, it actually snaps on the frames. That's it for this playback thing. In here, in the resources, you have the groups. We just talked about this. You can create selection sets. Asset browser, you're going to use that a lot. This is where you pull in the samples, the characters. Actually, let's set that up now. If you right-click here, any folder. So guys, if you want to follow through this one, it's important because we're going to be pointing to a folder on the S drive. So you might want to do this because there's a bunch of characters there, more mocap samples we can use. So if you right click and you say add favorites path, you go to S drive, .3D animation, go down to my name, J Nasrallah, and select the samples folder. Okay. Everybody there? Okay, and just click OK. So now you have that you shortcut to that samples folder on the S drive. So if you open that up, click plus, you have a folder called anims. Open back up, you'll get another folder. So there's a bunch of mocap files here. Same thing as the previous moves. You have a female walk, female run, a bunch of stuff here. We'll go through that in second, third, or fourth week, because then we're gonna start assembling stuff. So we'll go through that that week. Second two folders are the same, more motion. These folders, C3D, these are the captures we did with the second class, previous classes. Don't worry too much about these because if you load them in, you will see a bunch of just markers. We'll go through that, I think 5 or 6 weeks from now. In characters, there's a bunch of characters that came with the Autodesk. You can load them up and see if they fit your previs. But you can still grab any mesh from the internet and we can go through the Mixamo stuff setup. Okay. Props, there's a couple of props in there, but you can download anything from the web and turn it into a prop. But that's later, like in a few weeks from now. Yeah. You can use anything from these folders. They're all part of the samples. So you can use props, you can use characters, any one of these characters. Yeah, yeah. Go through them and just pick the one you need. Sets, again, it's actually, are we done? They're just simple layouts, like a 3D layout you can use. But again, you can still download for your previs, you can still download whatever you need from the web. What else? So this is the asset browser. Filters, we're not going to go through it. It's too much. Properties is every object in the scene has a property. You can actually make the control rig bigger if you like the marker settings to be bigger. You say select, let's say the shoulder. You go in marker setting. And you increase the size, so you can change the size of your control rig. It displays your translation, rotation information, a bunch of other stuff. You can actually change the look too. So you can go from sphere to cross. You could change the way it looks. In here, key controls. Oh, we skipped the pose control. We'll go through it. So these are how you create poses and apply them on your character. I'll keep it light for today. It's a bit, to explain it is a bit complex, but let's keep it light. Key controls, this is where you control the keys on your character. So let's say you can, yeah, it's hard to explain these now. You can delete keys here. You can create keys. You can actually change if you're keyframing, you can change the type of key you're keyframing. So here, by default, it's auto key. You can change it to linear, to smooth, to stepped. We'll go through that next week once we are keyframing from video reference. Okay. Layers, this is the same thing as in Maya. You can create multiple layers and just add it to your motion. This is probably the last few weeks of the previs where you're finished with the story mode. You can go in, create your layers, and start editing the motion, fixing issues, editing on the layer, basic stuff, same thing as Maya. Again, like I said last week, your motion is always on the base. See, when I select the base layer, that's when you see the keys. On layer 1, there's nothing because we haven't done any editing. The last section is Navigator. We went through it a bit. Again, everything is grouped by group. So you have your lights, you have your poses, you have your takes. So takes is this here. So right now we have 2 takes. Take 1 is empty, and Backfist is the motion that we just loaded. Don't worry too much about this. We'll go through it next week, in the next 2 weeks. Yeah.
Last week you mentioned about that reason you're using Motionbuilder instead of Maya. Like you can do it in Maya also.
So yeah, we're gonna go through the Mixamo stuff today. I'll show you how you could just load that same file inside Maya. It's very, just go import file. It will create the control rig for you automatically. But the reason we're using Motionbuilder is because the course it's all about teaching you Motionbuilder, all the ins and outs of Motionbuilder. So that's why we're not touching too much stuff in Maya. But if next week you want a keyframe in Maya, I'm not going to stop you as long as you come back to Motionbuilder and use that file inside Motionbuilder. Okay. If you're more comfortable to keyframe in Maya, I don't mind. Just for next week. All the other stuff will have to be in Motionbuilder afterwards. F curves is your normal F curves in Motionbuilder in Maya. It's the same thing. So if you select the base layer, you go in F curves and you select the bone, and you select the translation or rotation or both. You will see all the curves. This is where you control everything. It's basic functions. You can change the tangents here to linear or smooth. You can add values to the curves, and you can edit them just like any software. So you can go in and move these around. Same thing. We'll go through that a little bit next week. It's very advanced for some of this stuff, but we'll go through it next week. Story, this is the last one I'm going to talk about. The story is where you stitch all the motion. We'll be spending a lot of time in this, like about 3 weeks. So this is where you put clips together. So let's say, I'll do a quick example. So let's say I'm going to insert a track called character animation track. So here you have to select the characters. Each track needs a character. So you select it. And then you bring in different motions. I think we went through a little bit last week, right? So we bring in a backfist. The reason, actually, I'm going to bring in something else, the jab. So the reason you don't see the jab is you have story mode off. So you need to turn it on. So now you see the jab, right? And you see the backfist. So that's story mode in a nutshell. That's where you put everything together. Okay. Any questions on the overview before we start the Mixamo stuff? Yeah.
Can you add a character or a series and then from the holding those working? I don't know how to remove it.
Okay, let me come recording. So for this assignment, we're going to be using this Maya file as 3D animation, my name, samples. There's a Maya file. If you open that, it's already rigged. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just export the mesh. Let me see. Geo. Select objects. Yeah. So if you open up the Maya file in layers or display, select the geo layer and go file, export selection, click on the square, and we need to choose FBX export. Was it FBX or OBJ? I think it was OBJ. Maybe both. Yeah, I'll try FBX. I haven't done this in a while. So export selection. I'm going to go in my computer, I'm going to start organizing my folder. I highly suggest you do. Yes. You select the mesh and you go export file, export selection. Because you don't want to export everything in the scene. You just want to export the mesh. Okay. So I'm going to go in Mobu. I'm going to create a folder on my D drive. I'm going to call it characters. We'll go through this organizing process next week. I'm not going to be too picky today. Call it Mike. So now we have in D we have a Mike FBX. Okay, we just exported an FBX from Maya. So if I load that in Motionbuilder, just want to see what it looks like. So in this case, I want no animation, so I don't need any animation. It's this guy. So he doesn't have any textures. So if you find, and he's in A pose, actually, let's try it. Actually, I'm gonna try. So the reason it's in A pose, it's because FBX, I think it doesn't understand the vertices are in T pose, so it exports as the model was created. So OBG might be better. So I'm gonna try it. Actually, I'm gonna try the A pose, see what kind of problems we're gonna get. Because if you find an A pose, maybe it's gonna work. So let me try it. So select or just drag and drop. Upload. Okay, so it's complaining that it didn't like the FBX file. So in this case, we're going to have to export as an OBG. So again, File, Export Selection. This time we choose OBG. Keep everything by default. Export Selection. Characters. Mike. So now we have a Mike OBG and an MTL. So MTL is the material. So if you have textures on it, a bunch of stuff, that's the file it takes. Upload. Drag the OBG. Whoops. Okay, so the OBG is correct. It creates it in a T pose, so it should be ready to go. You click next, and now you assign the stuff, the points. So you guys went through this with Charles, right? Okay. So I'll do it super quick, so I don't spend too much time on it. Knees and groin. By the way, if you want to, guys, keep it down, please. If you're discussing personal stuff, if you don't mind, please take it outside. If you log into, if you want to search the web for some references, I included that reference on Moodle. So just open up the Word doc, resources. There's a bunch of sites in there for some nice characters if you want to download the T-pose. Okay, so this character has been skinned. It's ready to go. I'm not going to go through the loading animations on top of it yet. I'm just going to go through taking this character and applying and making a control rig out of it inside Motionbuilder. Okay. So now we have the T-pose with the joints inside. You don't see the joints, but we're going to download it. Download. FBX, pose, keep it in T-pose, keep everything by default, download. We go in the download folder, should be here, mic. So I'm going to rename this mic Mixamo. Okay, so this way I know where this mic came from. Go back to the character folder, put it in, and now I'm going to open this inside Motionbuilder, okay? So I'm going to go, don't merge, because whatever you have open, actually let's do a clean scene. Clean scene is file new. We merge or open that, no animation because there's no animation yet on it. So now we have the mesh and the joints, okay? The joints are a little bit big, so we can change the size. So if you go in scene, what are these guys? Yeah, I'm not sure. You can. I think you can delete these. I don't know why. It's probably from Mixamo. Anything with the set, you can probably delete. You don't need these. Okay, it's okay. We'll keep it for now, and we'll go through it after. So. Okay, so you have the skeleton is under the hips, right? So you have hips, spine, legs, blah, blah, blah. If you right click on it and go select branches, you've selected all the bones. You go on properties, skeleton node setting, and you bring down the 100 just to make it a little bit smaller. You don't need to have those bones that big, basically. Okay, so now if you select any of these joints, you try to rotate, you're deforming the mesh. Okay, this is FK. You don't have a control rig assigned to this joint skeleton. So the way to do this is you need to go in Asset Browser, go in Templates, Characters, and you will have a button called Character. You just click and drop this in the space, in the empty space in the viewport. Okay? So what a character is the character template inside Motionbuilder. Okay? What that character template includes, it includes the joints, the one you see in front of you, and the control rig equivalent. Okay, so a character template will make the connection between the joints and the control rig. Okay, as you will see here, it will open up the character definition. Okay, so all these joints have nothing assigned to them right now. The joints inside the character template have nothing assigned. So what we need to do, we need to populate this character template with the joints from the Mixamo rig. Not rig, joints, if you want to call it. So you select the first bone. Start from top to bottom. This way you don't forget anything. Select the head joint. And select the equivalent in the character template. You right click and you go assign selected bone. So what you just did is you assigned that head bone in the character template to that joint from the Mixamo skeleton. Okay? It's the same process for the next 20 to 30 joints. So that's the longest part, sort of definition you have to do. It's a bit tedious, but that's how you do it. So if, let's say, you on the web, you go on the web, you find a mesh with a skeleton, and the skeleton is deforming the mesh, you don't need to go through Mixamo. I'm not saying you have to actually go through Mixamo. If you find a mesh with the joints already assigned, that's how you bring it into Motionbuilder. You bring it in and you assign these bones. So I'm going to do it super quick. Left shoulder is actually... Yeah, it's this one. No, actually, it's this one here. Okay? So the left shoulder, be careful because it's actually above the left arm and right arm. Okay, so you have to click on this little arrow here and select this one. Okay? No, just one at a time. One at a time. Assign selected bone. Oh, it's orange, so maybe it's this one. Yeah, it's the one before. It's actually the one connected to the spine. So the shoulder is the one last. That's the one closer to the spine. You go back out. So the nice thing about Motionbuilder, it's asymmetric. It's asymmetry. There's asymmetry in the character definition. So if you assign one side, it will do it automatic on the other side. You see, both are green now, so the right shoulder is done already. So technically, you'd only need to do it on one side. So we go down the chain, left arm here, assign. Forearm. And the wrist. So, why is it? The right arm doesn't seem to be parallel to the x-axis. So if you see something orange in the character template, it might be to the x-axis. It might be just the rotation. But it is all right. Okay, so sometimes Motionbuilder complains about the rotation values, so you might have to correct it by hand. So if you select the left arm, the orange ones, and you go on rotation, and you change to global. If you're in local, you need to change to global. You will see values here. So you might have to just even those out. So if it's minus 80.3, you need to put minus 90. Okay. This one should be 90. Okay, it's still... Maybe it's the wrist. No. Okay, I'm not gonna worry too much about this. Let's see. Sometimes it bypasses that error. So I'm just going to continue with the assignation and we'll see what happens afterwards. We're missing one here on the neck. So I'm going to say the same thing with the shoulder. Select the bottom one. And select. Okay, I'm going to freeze the mesh. Same thing I did as before. Oops. Because I'm going to keep selecting the mesh by mistake. So groups, create, mesh. Remove picking and translation. So now I only select the bones. Okay. So selecting the neck is going to be a little tricky. Oh, it's not bad. It's the one underneath. I select the one in the character template. Assign selected bone. That's good. Now we can do the spine. So spine is the first spine bone. Okay. I go in for the second ones. And I think that's the last one, spine 2. Okay. Go back out. Hips. Hips is the first one. And then we can do the legs. And last one are the toes. Okay, so it has an exclamation point. It might pass. So let's see what happens. We should save. So I go for save as. So I'll remove Mixamo and call it Mike Mobu for Motionbuilder. Okay, so now you finish the character definition. You ready to turn on the control rig. Okay? Anybody remembers how? Source and? Okay, so switch like that. So this didn't ask us before. So it's going to tell you there's two different kinds of control rigs in Motionbuilder. There's a biped and a quadruped. In this case, we go with the biped. That's the same question we were asked before. So we want FK and IK. That's it. Now you have a control rig. So now, same as before, the file we did before, everything is there. So I'm gonna finish off the assignment and I'm gonna show you another quick and dirty way to do this and much faster. Okay. The reason I showed you this long way, so you have to understand how to define your character. Okay. Because if you download something from, not from Mixamo, let's say you found something from Epic Games or Epic Store, the stuff you're going to download, not from Mixamo, is not compatible with the quick way that I'm going to show you. Okay? But at least you know how to do that now. So right now, you're ready to keyframe. You're ready to put motion on this. So I'm going to do a quick test. So I'm going to go in story. Actually, no, I'll leave the story out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to load the motion on this guy, okay? So character button, blue button, file, load. I'm going to go to the S drive. Same place as we did the favorites. Samples, animations, anims. I'll go generic. I'll use the climb. Okay. So all these files already have a control rig inside of them. That's why we're able to use the character load, file load. If they didn't have, we're not going to be able to load. So I'll show you how to load it. Climb. So you get a bunch of options here. This is the take climb that we're loading. And the easy one to pick is plot to control rig. Okay. So what that will do is we'll take the motion, the incoming motion, and we'll bake it on the control rig in your scene. Okay. So you change it to plot to control rig, and you go open. So what we get, so he's probably climbing on a horizontal surface. That's what's happening. So as you can see, the arms are going through. There's a bunch of stuff happening, right? So I'm going to show you the other options. So if you go File, Load, same thing. One of these options is called, the first one is called Assign as Character Input. So what that will do, it will import that control rig inside your scene, and then you can manipulate the sort of the IK in the control. You'll see in a minute what that means. So if you click on this, Assign as Character Input. So this is the control rig from the climbing file, okay? And right now, this character, the one with the mic character, is being driven by this one, okay? So what you could do is you select these, the hands, and you can tweak how much are they following the original file, okay? So if you go to this pose, you'll probably see a big difference. So now they're trying to reach what the original file is doing, okay? I think I might be losing some of you, but let's forget about this one. We'll go through it next week or the week in 2 weeks, because let's keep it simple. Go File, Load, Plot to Control Rig. That's where we're going to end up. So before we break, I'm going to show you the quick and dirty way. So if you go through Mixamo like we did today, so this is the file we downloaded from Mixamo. I showed you the long way, how to assign character definitions to the skeleton. It's the same step, basically. You have to go in Templates, Characters. Instead of dropping the character template in the viewport, you drop it on one of the joints. Okay? So as soon as one of the joints is green, you let go, and you say, it gives you an option. It gives you a characterize option. You just go characterize, go biped, and then you need to switch to control rig. So because the Mixamo file has the definition, or the naming is all set up properly, they actually made it on purpose so Motionbuilder takes it automatically. Okay? So you don't have to do the character definition stuff. It's already compatible with the character template inside Motionbuilder. So all you need to do is drop the character on the joint, characterize, and then switch to the control rig. Again, I showed you the long way because if you download a file outside of Mixamo, you're not using Mixamo, you need to learn how to do the character definition. Yeah?
Because when you import Mixamo, like
the mesh?
The mesh of the bones and the joints are like really large, how did you?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, sure. So the next week's assignment is you upload a mesh, or you find a mesh, you find a joint, you put it in Motionbuilder, and you have to end up with a control rig and motion on top of it. Okay, so you have to load any one of these motions, whether it's in the previs, in the samples, you can choose whatever. You can go through them and have fun. Just go through them, and actually it's a good idea to go through them to start thinking about your idea, what you want to do, right? This is beside the mocap room. If you don't find anything in there, that's where we're gonna go and motion capture some stuff in the mocap room. Yeah, I'll show you how to change the size of the joints, right? Yeah. So a quick way to select all the joints at once. If you hold down space bar and you, okay, so because the mesh is still there, I'm just gonna freeze it. Let's see if it's gonna work. Yeah, it works. So if you hold down space bar and you right click on the mouse on the hip bone, sometimes it doesn't work out. It's tricky. That's how you select all the joints, because the hip bone is the parent. So when you space and right click, you select all of them. You can do that with anything, actually. If you say you want just to select the arms, hold down space, you select that. So select all of them, go in the properties, and in skeleton node settings, just make that smaller or bigger. You could type it in, 50 or 25. That's it. Yep.
Were on the folder in 3D animation folder and
yeah.
those motions.
Yeah, on the S drive. Should be on S, 3D animation, my name, and samples. And NIMS. Yeah, somebody else had a question?
It was basically the first step. So when you have this, for the long way, I missed the part where you drag and drop the character.
Yeah.
And how to set up like the head with the head.
Okay, let me pause the video.